Could they not have a couple hundred more? Anyway, I don't know. Your views, GBViews, GBNews.uk. We'll move on from that now, because the US midterm elections are taking place today, and millions of Americans are heading to the polls to vote. Held halfway through a president's 4-year term, they're typically seen as a test of just how well whoever's in the White House is doing. Sleepy Joe Biden. Currently, the Democrats control both US chambers of the Congress, which is the House of Representatives, and the Senate, but their majority is slim. Republicans need just 5 seats to take the House and just 1 to control the Senate. If that happens, President Biden would effectively have his hands tied for the next 2 years. You hate to see it, as the Republicans can block his ability to pass laws. But meanwhile, Donald Trump, former President Trump, has used his final rally to give his biggest hint yet that I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to run. I think all of the sound money, as it were, appears to be at the minute that President Trump is going to announce his run, his 3rd attempt, by the way, for the White House in the coming days. What do you feel about that? I personally think it's going to be huge. Joining me now is former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump. It's John Bolton. John, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I must say it's a fantastic get, a great booking, as we call it in the industry. Brilliant to have you on the show. You know the guy. Is President Trump going to be coming back?
Well, I don't think so. And it's a minority. It's a minority opinion. But the logic, I think, is pretty straightforward. He knows he lost in 2020. He fears he would lose in 2024. He doesn't want to go down in history as a loser, so he will talk about it incessantly until 2024 and then find a way not to run and try and be a kingmaker within the Republican Party. Now, the expectation is, as you just said quite correctly, that he will announce next week. And not to put too fine a point on it, that has different meanings in the American context. Will he file the paperwork with the Federal Election Commission? Will he make the personal financial disclosure that's required of presidential candidates? Or will he talk about it in some other way? It could be he's worried about the potential of a pending indictment by the Department of Justice, and he may think if he declares his candidacy early, the Justice Department won't indict him. A lot of considerations. We should compare notes next week to see exactly what he said.
We should. We should. I've got to ask you this. Look, you're not just saying this. You're not bitter because he sacked you.
He didn't sack me. I resigned. But that's another point of debate.
There you go. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, look, do you not think he would actually beat? I mean, I suppose another big question is even if Joe Biden will run again. Let's just focus on that quickly. Do you think that President Biden is actually in charge? Because I remain unconvinced.
Yeah, look, I don't think Biden is going to run in 2024, especially if the Democrats do as poorly today as most of the polls suggest. I think many people wonder whether he's going to be able to continue as president through 2024 or whether they will have to invoke our 25th Amendment, which in part covers conditions where a president has become incapacitated. But I think the greatest likelihood is that in 2024, both the Republican and the Democratic parties will nominate 2 completely different people.
Is America really on a precipice at the minute? Because President Biden, you could argue the Democrat Party as a whole, is really starting from an outsider's perspective, just from looking at it from this side of the pond, starting to make America look not powerless, but less powerful on the world stage. When you compare what Putin is doing, Xi Jinping in China, what's been going on in the Middle East as well, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, for example. And then again, when Biden's banging on about the idea he's going to shut down coal plants, stop drilling and all of this stuff, and what's been going on at the border with Mexico, some people would argue that maybe now is the time for America to have a strong man, and that might be Trump.
Well, it would certainly be beneficial to have a strong president with a philosophy in charge. The trouble with Trump is he doesn't have a philosophy, and he tends to blow with the wind. Its policy is dictated by what's good for Donald Trump rather than what's good for the country. The Republicans will have a very large and I think very competent field of people running for the nomination in 2024. And that's a debate I think we should have. But, again, depends on the results that come out from today's vote. But I think the referendum aspect of the midterm election will deliver a very negative report on Biden's presidency to date.
Well, yeah, but I think rightly so as well. But can I just say, because of Donald Trump, you said there he shoots from the hip, and he does, OK? And he's a one-off, a complete and utter one-off. I personally have never had the kind of relationship with him that you have had. You know him a lot better than I do. From an outsider's perspective and from someone in my industry, love the guy. Box office stuff. I thought it was great. Never a dull moment, never a dull moment. But, you know, I didn't have to live with him, for want of a better phrase. So I can understand maybe people have a different form of view. But the unpredictability of it, I just wonder whether it sets the likes of Putin and the Chinese leader on a bit of a back foot. You don't know what he's going to do next. He, therefore, by definition, poses a bit more of a threat. And hear me out on this. Potentially, Donald Trump is better for world peace as a result of that.
No, that's pretty far from reality, actually. You know, Richard Nixon kind of invented this idea of the out of control president when he told Henry Kissinger, tell the Chinese, look, you got to watch out for this guy Nixon, no telling what he'd do. But the method to that madness was the Chinese knew Nixon's entire career had been based on anti-communism. And so the fear was he really would do something that would harm the Chinese communist regime very dramatically. With Trump, it's like living inside a pinball machine. And while that may cause uncertainty with your adversaries, it causes it with your friends, too. So the whole thing leads to the potential for more chaos.
OK. Sorry, very last. So you would not, if Trump stood, and we're looking ahead now, you would not vote Republican, or would you?
No, well, what I did in 2020 was I wrote in the name of a conservative Republican, which you're allowed to do in Maryland, because there was no conservative Republican on the ballot.
OK, good stuff. All right, well, look, thank you very much. Great to chat to you. We will have to compare notes, actually. I've enjoyed this little back and forth. John Bolton there, former national security advisor to Donald Trump. He said he resigned. Some people don't. Anyway, there we go.